You have one choice. Marry me or lose your home today. The words hit Sophia Bennett like a lightning bolt as she froze mid-step in the cramped living room of her tiny New York apartment, rain streaking the window behind her, water pooling on the threadbare carpet. She had been fumbling with her rent check just an hour ago, trying to stretch every last dollar to cover the overdue notice from her landlord. And now a sharply dressed man stood in her doorway, eyes cold yet measuring, holding a leather-bound folder that looked far too official for someone with such a stark ultimatum. Ethan Carlisle, the billionaire lawyer whose name had been whispered in law circles and tabloids for months, looked down at her with an unreadable expression, his tailored navy suit immaculate against the disarray of her one-bedroom chaos. Sophia's heart pounded as she backed toward the peeling wallpaper, the smell of wet raincoat and old coffee filling the air, mind racing through every possible explanation, every escape route, yet knowing deep down that none would work. Her hand clutched the edge of the sofa as Ethan stepped forward, the light from the half-broken lamp catching on the gold cufflinks at his wrists, each movement precise, controlled, demanding obedience without words. "I'm serious," he said, voice low but unwavering. 1 year. No exceptions. No negotiations. You comply with the terms, and your home remains yours. Refuse, and you will find yourself on the street with nothing left. The air felt thick, almost suffocating, and Sophia swallowed hard, glancing at the worn checkbooks, the unopened eviction notice, the scattered sketches of her dream bakery that now seemed impossibly distant. Her mind darted to the stacks of overdue bills, the email from her college loan servicer, the gentle, disappointed face of her younger brother who counted on her every day. She knew survival had never felt so cruel, and yet there was something about the controlled certainty in Ethan's gaze that made her pause, weighing the impossibility against necessity. The leather folder opened with a crisp snap, pages shifting, contracts detailing conditions. No emotional attachment, maintain discretion, adhere strictly to his schedule and expectations. Sophia's fingers traced the lines, words like shackles and lifelines intertwined. She glanced back at the window, rain dripping down the glass, each drop a ticking clock, each reflection of herself in the murky puddles on the floor a mirror of desperation. Ethan's presence was overwhelming yet strangely calm, as though he existed outside the chaos of her life, a storm of certainty she could not ignore. She inhaled sharply, the scent of rain and leather mingling, heart hammering against ribs that felt too small to contain the panic. "Do I have a choice?" she whispered, voice trembling yet defiant, eyes locking with his, seeing for the first time a flicker of something human beneath the stoic exterior. Ethan's jaw tightened, a hint of impatience flashing, then softening almost imperceptibly. "You do," he replied evenly, "but your options are limited. I suggest you decide quickly." Sophia's mind raced through memories of empty cupboards, the rent notice, the futility of job applications, and then, against every instinct, every sense of pride, she nodded slowly, a shiver running through her as the weight of inevitability settled across her shoulders. Ethan's eyes flicked briefly downward at the motion, then back up, a subtle curve at the corner of his lips, acknowledging the surrender that was survival, not love, not choice, but the hard calculus of necessity. The rain outside intensified, tapping a steady rhythm on the panes, a soundtrack to a moment that would irrevocably alter the trajectory of her life. And Sophia Bennett took a deep breath, forcing her feet forward toward a destiny written not by dreams, but by the terms of a contract she had no choice but to honor. The next morning, Sophia woke to the soft gray light filtering through the thin curtains of the guest suite in Ethan Carlisle's penthouse, the city below still wrapped in mist and early morning drizzle. She had spent the night staring at the ceiling, mind replaying the events from the night before, the weight of the contract pressing against her chest like an invisible hand. Every detail from the leather-bound folder flickered behind her eyelids, the words etched with certainty, the stipulations that dictated every movement and thought for the year ahead. Her small suitcase lay by the door, clothes neatly folded, shoes lined up as if ready for a life she had never chosen willingly. As she rose, the chill of the hardwood floor bit at her bare feet, reminding her just how unfamiliar and grand the space was compared to the cramped apartment she had called home. The kitchen shimmered with stainless steel and marble, every surface immaculate, an aesthetic that seemed almost alien to her, and she felt a pang of dissonance between the world she knew and the one she had been thrust into. Ethan appeared silently in the doorway, his presence commanding yet restrained, dark hair catching the early light, suit pressed to perfection, a subtle scent of cedar and cologne lingering in the air. He held a tray with a simple breakfast, nothing ostentatious, yet presented with precision and care. Sophia hesitated, her hand brushing against the smooth edge of the counter, heart pounding, unsure how to navigate this gesture of courtesy within the rigid boundaries they had agreed upon. Ethan's gaze met hers, calm, unyielding, yet a flicker of something softer passing through the sharp lines of his face. "You do not have to eat if you are not ready," he said evenly, tone neutral but not unkind. Sophia swallowed, nodding slightly, letting her eyes drift to the cityscape outside, imagining the streets she had walked only yesterday, the rain still glistening on the sidewalks, and the sense of vertigo at her sudden displacement filling her chest. She finally moved toward the tray, picking up the cup of coffee, feeling the warmth seep into her fingers, a small grounding point in the whirlwind of the new reality she was now living. As they moved through the morning, Ethan outlined the day with measured precision, each appointment, each meeting, and each interaction laid out like a map she had no choice but to follow. And yet in his methodical tone, there was an undercurrent of logic, a reassurance that within these parameters she could survive, perhaps even find small victories. Sophia listened, absorbing the details, each instruction a reminder of her delicate position and the trust implicit in her compliance. At moments, she caught glimpses of his hand gestures, the subtle motions that revealed years of discipline and control, and she could not help but contrast it with the chaos of her own life, the mess of unpaid bills, the borrowed furniture, the constant worry of what tomorrow would bring. Yet despite the fear, there was an unexpected clarity in the structure, a strange sense of relief that the chaos had been momentarily replaced by order, and as the day progressed, Sophia found herself taking careful steps, learning the rhythm of the household, understanding the expectations, and cautiously navigating the space between autonomy and obligation, all while feeling the quiet presence of Ethan nearby, a reminder that the life she had been forced into was as much about survival as it was about learning to inhabit a world that had once seemed completely unreachable. Sophia spent the morning moving cautiously through the sprawling penthouse, noting the subtle elegance of every corner, the polished oak floors, the abstract art lining the walls, each piece demanding attention, each space reminding her that she was a visitor in a world she had never imagined. Ethan followed at a measured distance, his presence steady, not imposing but impossible to ignore, guiding her through the morning routine with quiet authority, outlining the schedule of meetings, the proper etiquette for the upcoming luncheon with his partners, the expected decorum in interactions that could affect his reputation. Sophia felt the tension of the contract weighing on her, each instruction a tether she could not escape, yet the clarity of his expectations provided a strange reassurance, a framework that allowed her to navigate the unfamiliar terrain with cautious confidence. They moved into the dining room, where sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the meticulously set table, the silverware aligned with precision, and Sophia found herself tracing the edges of the porcelain cups, wondering how such attention to detail could coexist with the gravity of the choice she had made. Ethan watched her closely, not criticizing, not hovering, simply observing, as if cataloging every response, every hesitation, every micro-expression. The air was still but for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the occasional distant honk of traffic below, and in that stillness, Sophia felt the weight of her own inadequacy, the distance between the life she had lived and the life she was now forced to inhabit. As she sipped the coffee, bitter and strong, she caught a glimpse of the skyline, the clouds hanging low, rain-slicked streets reflecting the morning light, a city alive yet indifferent, reminding her that outside these walls, she was one among thousands facing their own struggles. Ethan's voice broke the silence, calm and controlled, explaining the nuances of the luncheon, the importance of maintaining composure, how to introduce herself to influential figures without betraying her nervousness, how to listen attentively while speaking only when necessary, each word a building block of survival in this new reality. Sophia nodded, absorbing every instruction, her mind a whirlwind of impressions, obligations, and the persistent awareness of the contract that bound her to him. Despite the formality, there were subtle moments that hinted at the human beneath the polished exterior, the occasional slight smile, the pause before issuing a command, the way his eyes softened momentarily when she made a correct observation, small signs that suggested there might be more to this arrangement than strict adherence to terms. As the morning unfolded, Sophia found herself adapting, moving with measured steps, speaking carefully, learning to anticipate Ethan's expectations while preserving the small autonomy she could claim, and by the time she prepared for the drive to the luncheon, she felt a tentative confidence, a fragile understanding that within the rigid structure imposed upon her, there existed space to navigate, to learn, and perhaps, to survive in a world that had once seemed completely unreachable, all under the watchful, measured presence of Ethan Carlyle, whose calm authority defined the rhythm of her new reality. The drive to the luncheon was quiet, the city passing in a blur of gray skies and wet streets, the occasional honk of a horn echoing from below. Sophia sat stiffly in the passenger seat of Ethan Carlyle's sleek black sedan, her hands folded tightly in her lap, eyes flicking to the dashboard clock, measuring each second as if counting down to some inevitable test. Ethan's eyes remained on the road, focused, calm, the faint crease between his brows betraying concentration rather than irritation. The contract lay folded neatly in his briefcase at his side, a silent reminder of the obligations that governed every step of the day. As they arrived at the high-rise where the luncheon was to take place, the doorman greeted Ethan with a subtle nod, respect evident in the crisp exchange, while Sophia felt a wave of nervousness sweep over her. She had never been in a space so polished, so meticulously curated, where every detail seemed designed to impress, to demonstrate power and influence. They were ushered into a private dining room, sunlight reflecting off the glass walls, illuminating the long mahogany table set with gleaming silverware and sparkling crystal. Sophia adjusted her posture instinctively, pulling her shoulders back, smoothing the fabric of her dress, trying to inhabit a persona she had never needed to before, yet now was essential for survival. Ethan introduced her to the attendees with formal courtesy, his voice measured, confident, while Sophia nodded politely, murmuring greetings, feeling the weight of scrutiny on her every move. As the luncheon progressed, Ethan guided her through the conversation, prompting responses, offering subtle cues on tone and timing, demonstrating the power of presence without overt control. Sophia listened carefully, absorbing the rhythm, noting the confidence in his calm demeanor, the ease with which he commanded attention while allowing her to participate without drawing negative attention. She began to find small victories, answering a question correctly, making a remark that earned a polite nod from a senior partner, a fleeting sense of competence blooming amidst the tension. Outside, the city continued its march of rainy hustle, oblivious to the small human dramas unfolding within the high-rise walls. And within the structured etiquette of the luncheon, Sophia discovered that even under pressure, there was room to navigate, to assert a delicate balance between compliance and individuality. Ethan observed her quietly, eyes flicking with interest at her ability to adjust, to absorb the unspoken rules, a subtle recognition passing in the briefest exchange of glances. Between bites of lunch, Sophia allowed herself to notice small details, the polished silver reflecting sunlight, the subtle scent of polished wood and fine linen, the quiet confidence of people accustomed to influence. Each observation anchored her, reminding her that she could find footing even in this unfamiliar world. By the end of the luncheon, she felt a tentative pride, a sense of accomplishment at having endured and participated successfully, while Ethan's glance toward her carried an unspoken acknowledgement that this first trial had been navigated well. The ride back to the penthouse was filled with a quieter tension, one softened by the knowledge that Sophia had begun to understand not just the rules, but also the rhythm of the world Ethan inhabited, and the subtle ways she might move within it without compromising herself entirely. The day leaving her both exhausted and strangely empowered. a sense of anticipation lingering for what the next test might reveal about the limits of her own resilience and the unexpected complexities of the man who had brought her into this world of structure, expectation, and cautious discovery. As the afternoon sun filtered through the tall windows of the penthouse, Sophia found herself alone in the study, the quiet hum of the city below a distant murmur compared to the swirl of thoughts in her mind. The room smelled faintly of polished wood and leather, a scent that seemed to anchor her as she reviewed the notes Ethan had asked her to study before the evening event, a combination of legal briefs, etiquette instructions, and preparatory remarks for the upcoming gala. Each page felt weighty, not just with the information it contained, but with the implicit expectation that she would perform flawlessly, that her presence would reflect not only her own abilities but the meticulous standards of the household she now inhabited. Sophia adjusted the stack of papers, smoothing the corners with care, her fingers lingering on the text as she absorbed the nuances, imagining herself in the room filled with influential figures, anticipating the questions, the subtle cues she would need to notice, the balance of speaking and listening, of confidence and humility. Ethan entered without a sound, his dark eyes scanning the room before settling on her, a faint smile breaking the formality of his otherwise composed expression. "You are doing well," he said softly, almost an afterthought, yet the words carried more weight than any formal compliment, an acknowledgement of her effort, a recognition of her adaptation to this world that had once seemed impossible. Sophia looked up, catching the sincerity, and felt a flicker of ease, a subtle shift in the dynamic that had been strictly transactional since their arrangement began. The clock ticked on, the minutes stretching with both anticipation and anxiety, as they prepared to leave for the gala, a meticulously planned affair of charity and networking, each detail orchestrated to the smallest degree. As they arrived, the lights of the ballroom shimmered against crystal chandeliers, reflecting in the polished floors, and Sophia's breath caught at the grandeur, the sense of power and influence condensed into one space. Ethan's hand on the small of her back guided her with quiet authority, his posture steady, his gaze sweeping the room, noting the arrivals, the subtle interactions, the social cues that would determine perception and opportunity. Sophia moved with careful precision, listening, observing, responding where necessary, the rhythm of the evening slowly becoming a dance she could navigate, though every gesture and word felt charged with the underlying weight of her contract. Between conversations and introductions, she caught glimpses of Ethan watching her, his expression unreadable yet attentive, the occasional nod or slight smile offering a rare sense of reassurance, a subtle acknowledgement that she was meeting his expectations. The dinner progressed, the soft clinking of silverware against china punctuating the murmurs of polite conversation, the faint strains of music weaving through the air, and Sophia found herself balancing the dualities of her role, absorbing the lessons, managing the impressions she projected, and gradually sensing the faint undercurrent of something more human beneath Ethan's composed exterior, a subtle warmth that hinted at complexities beyond the rigid boundaries of their contractual arrangement. By the time the final course was served and the applause for a charitable donation echoed through the room, Sophia felt a quiet accomplishment, an understanding that she had survived the first real social test, and that within the formalities and expectations, there were moments to observe, learn, and perhaps, in time, connect on a level that went beyond obligation. The evening leaving her both exhilarated and acutely aware of the intricate dance of influence, impression, and the emerging subtle bond between herself and the man who had introduced her to this world. As the gala wound down and the last guests trickled out into the crisp evening air, Sophia lingered near the grand staircase, her fingers lightly brushing the smooth banister, her heart still thrumming from the intensity of the night. The chandeliers above cast a warm glow, reflecting in the polished marble floor, and for a moment, the opulence of the room felt almost unreal, a stark contrast to the life she had left behind just days ago. Ethan Carlyle appeared silently at the top of the staircase, his gaze sweeping over her with a mixture of appraisal and something softer, something that hinted at the man beneath the formidable exterior. Without a word, he descended, the soft click of his dress shoes echoing in the vast space, and Sophia felt a subtle tension in the air, a pause that seemed to stretch between them, charged with the weight of unspoken thoughts. They walked together toward the balcony, the city lights twinkling below like scattered stars, and for the first time that evening, the walls of formality seemed to recede, leaving only the quiet intimacy of shared space. Sophia exhaled slowly, letting the cool breeze brush against her cheeks, the gentle rustle of her dress the only sound beyond the distant hum of traffic. Ethan stopped beside her, his silhouette framed against the glow of the skyline, and for a moment, neither spoke, the silence a conversation of its own, filled with possibility and cautious curiosity. Then, softly, he began to speak, his tone measured but personal, revealing glimpses of the pressures he carried, the expectations that weighed on every decision, the isolation that often accompanied his stature and responsibilities. Sophia listened, her eyes tracing the outline of his profile, noting the subtle tension in his jaw, the faint line of weariness at the corner of his eyes, understanding in a way that no contract could convey the human beneath the image. She shared fragments of her own fears, the anxiety that had accompanied her acceptance of the arrangement, the uncertainty that had filled her mind as she navigated each new expectation, each new social interaction, and for the first time, Ethan responded with empathy rather than instruction, his attention fully on her words, the usual reserve replaced by genuine engagement. The city lights shimmered on the glass railing, and Sophia felt a rare sense of being seen, truly seen, beyond the confines of obligation and the rigid rules of their agreement. As they continued to talk, she realized that trust, tentative and fragile, was beginning to form, a delicate bridge between two lives brought together not by choice, but by circumstance, and yet capable of creating moments of connection that transcended the boundaries of contract. The breeze shifted, carrying the faint scent of night-blooming flowers from the garden below, and Sophia took a deep breath, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly as she acknowledged the subtle warmth developing between them, the understanding that beyond compliance there could be recognition, respect, and perhaps, in time, the possibility of something deeper. The quiet realization settling that the human heart often finds ways to navigate even the strictest of obligations, and that, within this imposed arrangement, moments of genuine connection could emerge unexpectedly, fragile but luminous against the backdrop of wealth, expectation, and the city that never truly sleeps. Later that evening, as the penthouse settled into a quiet rhythm and the last of the city lights flickered against the glass walls, Sophia sat by the living room window, tracing the rain streaks on the glass with a finger, her thoughts tangled with uncertainty and anticipation. The events of the gala had left her exhilarated yet exhausted, a whirlwind of etiquette, conversation, and silent judgments, and, now in the solitude of the expansive apartment, the weight of expectation returned in full force. Ethan entered from the study, a folder in hand, his movements deliberate, each step measured across the polished hardwood floor. He set the folder down on the coffee table and regarded her, the soft lighting catching the angles of his face, revealing a vulnerability that contrasted with his otherwise composed demeanor. "We need to discuss the upcoming contractual obligations," he began, his voice calm but firm, the phrasing precise. Yet beneath it lingered an unspoken tension that both demanded and respected her attention. Sophia glanced at the folder, then back at him, her pulse quickening, wondering if this would be another test, another demonstration of control she was obliged to submit to. Ethan sat across from her, folding his hands neatly, eyes steady on hers, and for a brief moment, the room was filled with a silence that was almost tangible, a space where words carried weight far beyond their simple meaning. He began outlining new expectations, social events, meetings, and engagements, each detail a step in the intricate dance they were navigating together. Yet Sophia noticed a shift in the tone, a softness at the edges of the usual precision, a subtle acknowledgement of her efforts and adaptability. As he spoke, Sophia felt herself responding not out of fear or obligation, but with careful attention, recognizing the logic in his structure, the clarity in his instructions, and the rare moments of consideration he allowed, small gestures that hinted at trust building within the boundaries of their agreement. The evening progressed with the two of them moving through the apartment, reviewing notes, rehearsing introductions, and discussing potential scenarios for public engagements, each interaction layered with the unspoken understanding that this was both a trial and a form of guidance. Sophia's confidence grew incrementally, each correct response, each appropriate reaction, reinforcing her sense of competence in a world that had initially seemed alien. Ethan, observing quietly, allowed her space to demonstrate initiative, his subtle nods and rare smiles functioning as quiet approval, a recognition that beneath the formalities, the boundaries of contract could accommodate a genuine human connection. The penthouse lights dimmed gradually as the night deepened, the cityscape outside twinkling with distant illumination, and Sophia felt a cautious optimism, a recognition that the strictures of obligation were beginning to give way to mutual understanding. And the faint possibility that respect, trust, and perhaps the earliest seeds of affection could emerge within the parameters that had once felt so rigid, the evening leaving both of them aware that the path forward was as much about navigating feelings as it was about fulfilling the terms of the agreement. The night had deepened and the city below shimmered with countless lights, reflecting in the vast windows of the penthouse like a sea of stars, and Sophia stood near the balcony, fingers tracing the cold railing as she considered the events of the past week, the tension between contract and connection weaving through every interaction with Ethan Carlisle. The apartment was quiet except for the distant hum of traffic and the soft clinking of glassware from the small kitchen, and she felt a flutter of anticipation, aware that tonight would mark a pivotal moment, a turning point where obligation and personal feeling might collide. Ethan approached silently, holding a single envelope, its weight subtle but deliberate in his hand, and he extended it toward her with measured calm, eyes fixed on hers as if gauging the precise impact of this gesture. Sophia took it carefully, feeling the texture of the paper, noting the embossed seal and the meticulous handwriting, a stark contrast to the hurried scrawls that usually accompanied her life. "Open it," Ethan said quietly, the tone neutral, yet carrying an intensity that demanded attention, and as she lifted the flap, a photograph fell out, capturing a moment from the gallery of their early days together. The sketch she had once casually left on his desk now framed within the memory of their shared experiences. Her breath caught, a mixture of surprise and warmth washing through her, and she looked up to meet his gaze, finding in it a rare openness, a vulnerability that had been carefully hidden beneath the structure and expectations of their arrangement. "I wanted you to see that every step, every effort you have made, has not gone unnoticed," Ethan continued, his voice softening, the authority in his words now tempered with sincere acknowledgement. Sophia felt a surge of emotion, the rigid walls of the contract seeming to shift, allowing space for something more human, something unplanned yet profoundly real. The city lights twinkled behind him as he spoke of the trust he had begun to place in her, the confidence she had earned, and the quiet pride in her adaptability, her insight, and her courage to navigate a world so foreign to her own experience. She realized then that their relationship had evolved beyond the transactional, that the contract, while still a framework, had created a bridge, fragile but enduring, where genuine recognition and mutual respect could flourish. Ethan extended his hand, not as an imposition, but as an invitation, a silent offer to step into this next phase together with clarity and honesty, and Sophia, heart pounding and mind racing with the possibilities, took it, feeling the warmth of connection, the acknowledgement of shared experience, and the tentative beginnings of trust that promised something deeper than either obligation or expectation. The night air swirled softly around them, carrying the faint scent of rain on pavement and the distant hum of the city, and in that quiet, luminous moment, the boundaries between contract and personal choice blurred, leaving space for understanding, acceptance, and the subtle emergence of something they both had not anticipated but could not ignore, the first true step toward a future shaped not just by agreement, but by mutual recognition and the quiet promise of possibility. The following morning, the penthouse was bathed in soft sunlight filtering through the sheer curtains, casting a warm glow over the polished floors and elegant furniture, and Sophia stood near the window, taking in the city below while her thoughts lingered on the events of the past week, the tension, the lessons, and the unexpected connection she had begun to feel with Ethan Carlisle. The contract that had seemed so rigid now felt less like a cage and more like a framework that had allowed them to understand each other in ways neither had anticipated, and she realized that the boundaries imposed by obligation had, paradoxically, opened the door to something genuine. Ethan appeared quietly behind her, his presence steady yet unassuming, holding a small box in his hand, the leather exterior catching the morning light, simple yet deliberate in its presentation. He extended it toward her without a word, the gesture carrying more meaning than any carefully crafted sentence, and Sophia accepted it with a mix of curiosity and cautious excitement, fingers brushing his as she opened the clasp to reveal a delicate ring, its design elegant but understated, a symbol not of ownership but of recognition and shared experience. Ethan's eyes met hers, steady and sincere, and for the first time, he spoke not in terms of instruction or obligation, but with an openness that reflected his respect and admiration for her courage, her adaptability, and the moments of vulnerability she had shared within the walls of the penthouse and through the structured chaos of their arrangement. Sophia felt a rush of warmth, a mixture of relief, pride, and the quiet thrill of being truly seen, understood, and acknowledged, and she realized that the contract, while still a framework of reality, had become the conduit through which a deeper connection had emerged. The city skyline stretched endlessly beyond the balcony, the morning traffic a distant murmur, and in that expansive silence, they stood together, the weight of the past week lifting subtly as the promise of mutual respect, trust, and affection took its place. Ethan reached for her hand again, fingers intertwining with hers, a gentle affirmation of partnership and the understanding that what had begun as an arrangement had blossomed into something authentic, a shared journey marked by patience, observation, and gradual discovery. Sophia smiled, the apprehension of the past days softening, replaced by a quiet confidence that they could navigate the future together, not bound solely by contract, but by the mutual care and consideration they had cultivated. The ring glinted in the sunlight as she turned it slowly on her finger, a tangible representation of the subtle shift that had occurred between them, and she realized that love, trust, and respect were not born from declarations or instant intimacy, but from the patient unfolding of character, the recognition of effort, and the delicate balance of guidance and choice. As Ethan watched her, a small, almost imperceptible smile tugged at the corner of his lips, a signal that the journey they had shared, from the initial shock and hesitation to this moment of mutual understanding, had transformed their relationship, leaving a foundation stronger than any contract, a connection built on sincerity, patience, and the shared experience of navigating a world that neither had expected but both had learned to inhabit together, the morning light capturing the beginning of a new chapter where obligation had given way to choice, and choice had blossomed into genuine partnership and quiet, enduring affection.